Hey everyone! Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how global our community is. Now, let's get started. The first time the forest said my name, it used my own voice. I know how that sounds, but if you have ever worked a night shift alone in a national park, you know silence can get inside your head until every sound feels personal. I was a park ranger on the graveyard rotation, the one nobody fought for. Midnight to 4 in the morning, walking the perimeter, checking trailheads, making sure no drunk campers decided to wander off cliffs in the dark. That night the air had that heavy, wet bark smell, like the trees were sweating in the cold. My radio battery was down to 1 bar. The clock on my wrist said 12:47, and I kept telling myself I just needed to make it to 4 without embarrassing myself again. The last time I called something in, they logged it as auditory misperception. That is the polite way to say hearing things. I started my patrol at the lookout tower, same as always. Up there you can see the outline of the tree line against the sky, a black saw blade chewing at the stars. On the railing someone had carved a warning years ago, initials worn away. It just said, "Do not answer when they say your name." I had run my fingers over those words 100 times, and 100 times I had rolled my eyes. That night, my fingers lingered a little longer than usual in the dim red light of my headlamp. I checked the map board bolted to the wall. Every trail in the district, every numbered campsite. One of the older trails on the far side of the park had been scratched out, gouged in with a knife, so deep it cut into the wood beneath the map. Someone had written "area closed" in marker and then, smaller, "No calls answered here." I did not like the way that line sat there under my gloved hand. As I climbed down, the forest smell shifted. Facing the usual patrol path, the air was just cold and piney. When I turned toward the direction of the scratched-out trail, the smell of wet bark hit stronger, sweet and rotting at the same time. My radio hissed in my chest pocket, a little burst of static that almost shaped itself into a syllable. For a second it sounded like someone saying my name. Then it was gone. I told myself I was tired and started along the gravel road that loops past the first trailhead. A thin frost crunched under my boots. Somewhere far out in the trees, 3 notes whistled, soft and clear. It was the exact pattern we used to signal each other, the one I had used on my last shift. "Copy, you working my side tonight?" I asked into the mic, tapping the radio. Only static answered, breathing in my ear. I reached the first trailhead and saw the prints. Boot tracks coming out of the trees, crossing the sign, heading toward the darker side of the road where the boundary posts stand. Fresh edges, crisp in the frost, not softened by wind. The size and tread looked familiar, but I did not register that at first. "Hello." I called out, because you have to. "Park ranger. If you are out here, call back." From somewhere ahead came a dry cough and a faint "hey." Human, strained, like someone trying not to shout. My stomach nodded. A lost hiker in cold like this could go hypothermic fast. The smell of wet bark rolled in again, and the 3-note whistle floated out, just a little closer now that I followed the prints toward the tree line, radio crackling against my chest. As I reached the faded red boundary post, a burst of static jumped through the speaker and my own voice came out, distorted and thin. "Ranger Cooper, starting perimeter check, midnight 01. The radio said. It was the log I had made at the beginning of the shift. I froze. I had not keyed the mic. My thumb hovered over the button, cold and sweating at the same time. The forest behind the post stood perfectly still, every branch outlined in moonlight like veins. I knelt to look at the boot prints again and finally noticed what should have been obvious. Same sole pattern, same little chip missing on the heel. I glanced down at my own boots and felt my throat close. The prints were mine, only they were facing toward me, heel where my toes should be, like someone had been walking out of the forest to meet me step for step. The 3-note whistle came again, identical timing, identical pitch. My own pattern, thrown back at me. If I had been smarter, I would have turned around right then. Instead, I told myself it was some stupid prank, one of the guys from day shift with a recorder and too much free time. Anger is a warmer feeling than fear. I stepped past the red post, just one stride beyond the line we were not supposed to cross at night. Behind me, my radio beeped once, a tiny, dying sound. The last battery bar winked away. Beyond the post, the air changed like I had stepped into a walk-in freezer. My breath went white, even though it had not earlier. The smell of wet bark was so thick it felt like I could taste the tree's sap. Somewhere ahead, a pale, steady light glowed between the trunks, about the height of a lantern. "Hey, stay where you are," I called. "I am coming to you." The light did not move. The cough came again, the same rhythm as before. The same quiet hey. My skin crawled. Even echoes are not that precise. My compass on my watch face began to spin slowly, needle drifting, never settling. I felt the ground slope under my boots in a way that did not match the map in my head. The forest was rearranging itself, or that is what it felt like. The three-note whistle sounded again, this time from somewhere over my left shoulder, even though the light was straight ahead. "Cut it out," I snapped, voice shaking. "This is not funny." That is when I heard him. "Cooper, status check." A man's voice said close to my ear, no radio hiss, just words sliding out of the dark. It was a voice I had only ever heard in old training stories, the ranger who had walked off post years ago, the one they said had a breakdown and never came back. "Perimeter clear," another voice answered, and this one was mine. Exact tone, exact clipped way I say my call sign. Only I had not spoken. Every story I had ever laughed at about this place stacked up in my chest all at once. I could feel the forest waiting for me to do something, to decide. If I turned back, I would report a half-dead radio and weird sounds and maybe be tagged as unstable for good. If I went forward, I might find a real person in trouble, or something pretending to be. I chose to keep going. The lantern light began to dim as I approached, not like a flame dying, but like someone was turning down a dimmer switch. It rose slowly off the ground, straight up between the branches, until it was nothing but a pale smear among the stars, and then gone. The cough did not follow it. The cough repeated at ground level, exactly the same as before, like someone hitting play over and over on the same clip. The boot prints around me multiplied in the frost, spiraling out in a pattern I did not understand, all of them matching my tread. The three-note whistle came again, right behind my head, and this time I heard the intake of breath before it, the wet rasp that was not mine. The smell of bark and soil was so dense I felt like I was breathing through mulch. Voices overlapped. In the trees, some calling my name, some reciting radio check phrases, some whispering words I could not pick apart. "Ranger Cooper, starting perimeter check, midnight 01. I heard, and then again, each time slightly twisted that I remembered the carved warning on the rail. "Do not answer when they say your name." My throat burned with things I wanted to yell. Fear, anger, humiliation, all of it. For a moment I held it back. Then something cold and unseen brushed the back of my neck, light as a fingertip that I broke. "Stop it," I shouted into the trees. "That is my voice. Stop using my voice." Everything went quiet at once, like someone had hit mute on the world. Then the forest answered. Every tree line in front of me seemed to take one step closer without moving. The dark thickened, pressing against my eyes. For a heartbeat, I could see shapes between the trunks, silhouettes standing in the gaps, all facing me. My compass spun faster. My balance went sideways, as if the ground tilted, and I stumbled that I remember falling. I remember my knees hitting the frozen dirt. I remember voices all speaking at once, mine among them, all saying the same thing. Perimeter. Complete. Ending shift. Over and over until it was just noise. The next clear memory I have is my gloved hand on the lookout tower ladder. I was at the base of the tower again, breath ragged, heart hammering. Frost had melted in a ring around me, like I had been standing there for a long time. My watch said 3:59 a.m. I had no memory of walking back. The red boundary post was visible down the road, neat and harmless in the moonlight. From up on the platform, the trees looked the same as they always had. Silent, dense, innocent that we logged it as a normal shift. I did not file anything. I kept my job. I told myself I had finally had the breakdown everyone expected. 2 weeks later, at home, I was packing away my gear when my old duty radio, the one with the dead battery, crackled to life in the bottom of the closet. There was no power light, no hum, just a burst of soft static that sounded like someone breathing. Then, clear and low, I heard my own voice whisper those same 3 notes of our whistle pattern. Out in the hallway, the faint smell of wet bark drifted under my front door. I spent 6 winters patrolling that park, and I can promise you this much. There is a cabin out there that never existed. If you think that sentence does not make sense, good. It means you still sleep at night. This happened during a storm year, the kind where the clouds sit on the ridge like a weight. I was getting ready for my night patrol when I noticed an extra brass key on my ring. Same old car key, same gate key, same radio locker key, and then one more, dull and unmarked. I swore I had never seen it before. The other ranger laughed and said I was finally losing track of my own stuff, which was funny, because that was the second time that week someone hinted I was slipping. On the corkboard by the door, a faded maintenance report flapped in the draft. Cabin Delta, Mile 7 inspection, it said. We only had 3 official cabins, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, and none of them were on Mile 7. I told myself it was an old code they did not use anymore. Half an hour later, I was on the ridge, snow grains stinging my cheeks, my breath fogging my headlamp beam. Somewhere in the static, my radio spat out half a word. Cabin, then nothing but white noise. Dispatch claimed they had not said anything. I believed them. The voice had not sounded like dispatch.as. I hiked. I passed a trail marker painted in an old color scheme we had phased out years ago. The park guys had repainted everything the first summer I worked there, but this one marker still glowed in the outdated shade, slick with ice. That was when I smelled it, curling down the wind. Old wood smoke and damp wool. The way a cabin smells when someone has just come in from the snow, carrying the storm on their clothes. The nearest official cabin was miles off in the other direction. I adjusted my pack and kept walking, telling myself it was a neighbor's chimney from the valley. The storm banked up and swallowed the stars. For a moment, the radio hissed like a distant fire, then fell quiet. Somewhere ahead, between the black tree trunks, a yellow light blinked. Not lightning, not a headlamp. It had the soft, steady tone of a single bulb behind warped glass. Every time the wind shoved at the branches, the light slid out of sight, then back again, like it was swinging. I checked my map, checked the ridge, checked mile marker 7. There was nothing marked where the light Saturday. I listened and heard it. A soft ticking, too slow to be my watch, too close to be anything mechanical from the road. It was not loud, just patient, like a clock in another room. Curiosity is a bad survival trait, but it is good for a story. I stepped off the main trail, following a narrow line in the snow I had never noticed before. The smell of smoke and wet wool got stronger. My boots brushed against an old-style marker nailed to a tree, the same out-of-date color as the one near the station. My fingers brushed the mystery brass key on my ring. It clicked against my flashlight, a tiny sound that made my teeth itch. The trees thinned, and there it was. A one-room patrol cabin sat in a small clearing, roof hunched under snow, chimney dark. Light glowed behind one window, yellow and tired. Steps led up to a small porch. Snow on the steps was trampled in 2 sets of wet prints. One set was mine. I recognized the tread and the way my foot turned slightly left. The other set matched my stride perfectly, just 1 step ahead. Park ranger. I called, because that is the job. If you are inside, I need you to come to the door. No answer. The ticking grew a hair louder. but when I looked, I could not find a clock anywhere through the glass. Inside, I saw a coat on a peg, a steaming mug on the table, all the normal ghosts of human life. My first thought was not ghosts or cursed cabins. It was squatters, hunters, somebody using old maintenance stock that I lifted my radio to call it in. Static chewed my words and spat them back silent. No bars on my phone either. The storm had rolled tight around the clearing, blurring the trees together into one dark wall. The only real thing was the cabin light and the soft ticking that kept slipping away from my ears whenever I tried to locate it. I stepped onto the porch. The second set of footprints ended at the door, toes pointed inward. The brass key was cold in my glove when I picked it out. It slid into the lock like it had been made for it. For me. The door opened on the second turn. Inside, the smell of old smoke and damp will hit me full force. The coat on the peg was dry to the touch, but smelled like someone had just taken it off. The mug on the table was half full. I wrapped my fingers around it. For 1 second it was warm. Then, like someone flipped a switch, it went bone cold. No gradual cooling, just a jump. Anyone here? I called again. My voice sounded wrong in that room. Smaller. On the desk by the window sat a logbook. Same kind we use now. Same logo, same cheap cardboard cover. I flipped it open, half expecting to see some poacher's shopping list. Instead, I saw neat entries in careful handwriting, all dated. Patrols, weather notes, wildlife sightings. Only the last date froze me. It was from decades ago, long before I was born. Below that, space had been left blank. A pen rested across the page, and even though I was not touching it, ink lines had begun to appear, one slow curve at a time, like a hand I could not see was writing. The letters formed words I knew too well. Ranger on ridge, storm coming in. Deciding to use cabin delta for shelter. Rangers talk in the same dry language all over, but the handwriting looked almost like mine. I in the margin of an older page. Someone had written in a different, hurried script. If you are reading this, you stayed too long. There was a date next to it. The date was tonight. I could have turned around then, stepped back into the storm, taken my chances with the ridge. Instead, I told myself that if I abandoned a perfectly good shelter in bad weather because of creepy coincidence, I would never live it down. I shut the door, set my pack down, and decided to wait out the storm inside. That was the choice I cannot undo. The ticking got louder. I checked my watch. The second hand jumped in tiny, uneven bursts, as if it were catching up to a time I had not reached yet. The radio on my chest crackled alive in the quiet cabin. My own voice came through, flat and professional. Dispatch, this is Ranger Cooper, checking in at Cabin Delta. Secure for the storm. The timestamp on the transmission display was 10 minutes ahead of the current time on my watch. I had not said those words. Not yet. Something knocked at the door. Slow, patient, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I swallowed and looked down. Wet footprints began to appear, one by one, in the thin film of meltwater on the floor, pacing back and forth from the threshold to the table. No body making them, just prints, like shadows filling with water. The cabin light dimmed and brightened in a rhythm that matched my breathing. Then the ticking, then neither. The last thing I remember clearly is leaning over the logbook and seeing my name written at the bottom of the blank page. In my own handwriting, finishing the sentence I had watched form by itself. After that, everything smeared at the edges. I woke up lying on my back beside mile marker 7, snow falling straight down, no clearing, no cabin, no ticking. My pack was on my shoulders. My radio was dead. Behind me, where the side trail should have been, there was nothing but unbroken trees. We logged it as a simple weather delay. I did not mention the key or the light or my voice on the radio from 10 minutes in the future. I still have that brass key. I never turned it in. Every now and then, on bad winter nights, I catch the smell of old smoke and damp while seeping through my bedroom wall, and I hear a slow ticking inside it, like there is a clock running down behind the plaster. Sometimes, if I look out at the treeline behind my house, I can see a small yellow light flicker between the branches. It always looks like it is waiting for me to come back. You know those dead fire towers you see on distant ridges, just black skeletons against the sky? One winter night, mine was glowing like a lantern. The whole sector was supposed to be dark. We had cut the power the week before, and yet Tower 4 burned against the clouds as if someone had turned every light on and walked away. I was off shift, half asleep, boots by the door, when dispatch called. Tower 4's still drawing power, they said. No one's checked in since 11. Drive up and flip whatever someone forgot. Out here, wasted fuel is a sin, and I was already the guy who logged too many weird events, so I said sure, I would look. I did not remind anyone that Tower 4's lines and generator had been physically disconnected during maintenance. I just took the truck, watching that red beacon on the ridge blink in the wrong rhythm as I climbed the road. The closer I got, the stranger it looked. The aircraft light is supposed to blink steady, a simple pattern to warn planes. Tonight it dragged and stuttered, like a heartbeat skipping beats. Yellow light pulsed in the tower windows, not steady, but in short bursts, as if something was pacing in front of the bulbs. When I stepped out of the truck, the air bit my face with dry cold, but I could smell hot dust and warm metal, the scent wiring gets when it has been carrying too much current. Above me, the heavy lines that should have been dead hummed softly, a sound like bees living inside copper. Climbing those stairs at night is bad enough when you know another ranger is up there waiting with coffee. When you expect an empty room hooked to a dead panel, each step feels like a dare. Halfway up, the humming ran through the rail into my hand. My radio coughed static and my own voice came through, clear as if I had just spoken. Tower 4. Lights off, sector secure. It was the exact phrase I would usually use at the end of a check. My watch read 2:17 a.m. The tiny display on the radio said the transmission time was 2:24. I kept climbing, because the alternative meant believing I had just heard myself from 7 minutes in the future. The top landing. Light leaked around the doorframe like water. The knob was warm in my glove, though my breath smoked in front of my face. I opened the door. Every bulb blazed white. The overhead strip, the desk lamp, even the little emergency strip by the breaker box, all humming. The cot was made, the logbook open, chair pushed in. No extra boots, no coat, no human mess. Then I looked at the panel. Every breaker was thrown to OFF. The main switch too. No feed, no source. The lights burned anyway. As I stared at the switches, the room dimmed a fraction, then brightened again, like someone filling their lungs. The hum in the walls dropped to a slow, steady vibration I could feel in my teeth. My radio hissed. A different voice came through, flat and tired. It sounded like the ranger who had worked this tower before me, the one who quit after one season and never explained why. "Stop looking out the windows," he said. "That's how it notices you." I told myself it was a recorded test clip or some old transmission bouncing around the hills. I also knew we did not keep any recordings for this channel. Curiosity and stubbornness are a bad mix, and you already know what I did next. I turned toward the windows, because nothing makes you want to look more than being told not to from inside. With all the lights blazing, the glass turned into a mirror. I saw the cramped room behind me, the bright bulbs, the empty cot. I saw my own face, pale in the glare. Beyond that reflection, the night should have been just a flat black sky. Instead, right up against the outside of the glass, there was a patch of darkness that was somehow darker than everything else, like heat shimmer made of ink. Wherever I tried to focus, it slid away from my gaze, but I could feel it lining itself up with me, matching my height, my stance, the angle of my head. The red beacon above us sped up, its pulse leaking into the room. Every flash painted the smear a little thicker. My reflection began to lag half a heartbeat behind my movements, or maybe a half heartbeat ahead. When I blinked, the eyes in the glass stayed open for a fraction of a second. When I shifted my weight, The figure in the window seemed to be stepping away from something I could not see. That was the point where I should have backed out, shut the door, and blamed a bad indicator. Instead, I made my choice. I stepped deliberately away from the glass, walked to the breaker panel, and put my hand on the main switch, as if plastic and metal could shut whatever this was out. The switch was already down, but I pressed it anyway. Every light went black at once. The humming cut off so hard the silence made my ears ring. For one perfect heartbeat, I thought I had fixed it. Then the tower filled with blood-red light from the beacon above, flashing through the windows with no rhythm at all, wild and uneven. In that strobe, my reflection on the glass moved before I did, flinching, raising a hand, backing away. And over the open channel of a radio that should have been dead, my own voice whispered beside my ear, "Tower 4, lights off," as the darker smear slid from outside to inside, settling over my shadow like a second skin that I did not check the logbook. I did not go back to the windows. I found the trapdoor to the stairs by feel and climbed down into the dark, counting each step, promising myself that if I reached the truck, I would lie about everything. By the time my boots hit dirt, Tower 4 was a black skeleton again, the beacon blinking in the correct pattern, the windows emptied. We logged it as a faulty sensor. Dispatch was satisfied. On paper, the tower never lit when the lines were cut. A week later, driving past in broad daylight, I glanced up at Tower 4. Sun hit the glass so hard it should have been nothing but glare. But I saw a figure in the window, backlit in white, watching the road. The posture, the build, the tilt of the head were all mine. As my truck rolled under the hill, the figure raised a hand to the glass exactly half a heartbeat before I lifted mine on the wheel. If you ever see a dead fire tower burning with light when it should be dark, let it waste someone else's fuel. Whatever is up there is not paying the power bill, and it does not like being noticed. The last radio call from Campsite 13 came from a family that was not there anymore. If you ever work night shift at a campground, you learn to tell the difference between drunks, prank calls, and real fear. This sounded like the third kind. It was a slow night on the loop. Most sites were dark, a few campfires banked to coals, the kind of comfortable quiet that makes you think you might get out early. My checklist on the passenger seat had Campsite 13 crossed out in thick red ink. Closed for maintenance, management had written, even though nobody could tell me what was being maintained. I was halfway past the spur road when my radio popped and a young voice came through. "Hello, Ranger? I think someone is walking around our tent." There was a soft rasp underneath the words. The unmistakable sound of a tent zipper being tugged. Teeth clicking slowly. "Say your campsite number." I answered, because that is procedure. My thumb sat on the volume knob, but it would not turn lower than 13. The LED on the side glowed a stubborn little 13 at me. "13, the voice said. "We are at 13. I pulled the truck over. The air outside was cold and still, but a thin smell drifted in through the vents. Burned marshmallows and something sour, like sugar left too long in the sun. I checked the reservation screen on the dashboard tablet. Sites 11 and 12 had names, check-in times, plate numbers. 13 showed as closed, unavailable. No active booking. "Dispatch, you copy any late arrival for 1-3? I asked. "Nope," they said after a pause. "Loop is full, 13 is down. You probably got a cheap walkie bleeding through. We get teenagers doing that sometimes. If it comes with a valid return ID, log it. Otherwise, ignore it." The radio crackled again before I could answer. "Dad, do you see it?" The same childlike voice asked, higher now, closer to the mic. The zipper sound followed, one slow inch of teeth sliding open. My watch said 1:13 a.m. The call log on the radio screen stamped the transmission as 1:19. A curiosity and responsibility wrestled in my gut. I turned down the spur road toward 13 anyway. Trees pressed in closer here, pines leaning over the narrow lane, branches knocking gently on my truck roof as if they did not want me to pass. The site post for 13 was turned backward, number facing the woods instead of the road. My headlights swept an empty gravel pad, an empty picnic table, an empty fire ring. No tent, no car, no cooler, not even a trash bag caught in the bushes. The smell of burned marshmallow was stronger here, sweet sticking in the back of my throat that I killed the engine and stepped out. The other sites on the loop felt suddenly very far away. Their distant lanterns might as well have been stars. Around the fire ring, the dirt held a ring of footprints. Adult sizes, kid sizes, all jumbled, toes pointing in toward where the fire would have been. The stones were cold. No ash, no char, like someone had scrubbed it clean and left only the impressions of people circling. As I stepped into that ring, my radio whispered with overlapping voices. The same question repeated in different tones, some high, some low, all slightly wrong. Is someone walking around our tent? They asked again and again. Behind me, just beyond the edge of my flashlight beam, I heard the slow, careful rasp of a zipper being pulled, tooth by tooth. I spun around. No tent, no canvas, just trees and gravel and the turnstile post. My watch read 1:16. The radio display insisted it was 1:28. I was supposed to check in with dispatch at 1:30. If I bailed now, I could be back on the main road in time. Log this as interference and forget the whole thing. If I left, and there really was someone out here, I would be the ranger who ignored the call. I walked back to the truck and pulled an old incident binder from under the seat. Loop reports, noise complaints, lost property. One yellowing printout had a name I recognized from gossip, a family that had just driven away at dawn from 13 last year and never responded to the post-stay survey. The text of the interview with the father jumped out at me. We heard footsteps around the tent all night, it read. My kid kept asking, Dad, do you see it? The exact words I had just heard on my channel. This was not a new voice. It was a replay. The radio clicked again. Hello? Ranger, the child voice said, as if starting over. I realized I had been following the rule about not engaging untagged callers on instinct, treating it like a recording. That rule felt thin now, like fabric worn down by too many hands. That I stepped back into the ring around the fire pit and answered anyway. This is the Ranger, I said, using my name. What do you see? The air inside the circle tightened, like I had walked into the stretched skin of a drum. Silence, then a faint shuffle in the dirt around me, though nothing moved. The footprints seemed deeper at the edges of my light, as if weight had settled back into them. The radio went dead enough that I could hear my own breathing. Then it came back to life with a voice that turned every hair on my arms to needles. Is someone walking around our tent? It asked in my voice, pitched just a little higher, like a child trying to imitate me. The zipper sound started behind my neck, teeth opening so slowly I could hear each one release. The smell of burned marshmallow curdled into rot, sweet going sour. A glow rose around me, too diffused to be from my flashlight, like light passing through thin fabric. For a second, I felt something brush my shoulders, the weightless drag of nylon where no tent stood. Shapes shifted just beyond my peripheral vision. Circling where the walls should have been. A handprint bloomed in the dust at my feet, small and open. Fingers reaching toward my boot. I blinked, and I was standing beside the campground kiosk at the entrance. Pen in hand, mid-checkmark on my log sheet. The loop lights were steady. The air was clean pine and cold dirt. My checklist showed a neat tick next to 13 with the note, empty, closed. My watch read 1:32. The radio on my chest was quiet, volume still stuck on 13. We filed the night as routine. Dispatch had no record of any anonymous call from that channel. A week later, at home, I made the mistake of roasting marshmallows over the stove for nostalgia. The sugar turned black faster than it should have, releasing that same sour edge into my small kitchen. As I turned off the burner, I heard a zipper at the back door, teeth sliding open, slow and careful. Then, right behind the wood, a child's whisper asked, in my exact voice. Ranger, do you see it? If you have made it this far, you have spent the night with us. Out on the dark edges of the map, you have walked past the tree line where the forest can borrow your voice. You have stood on the porch of a cabin that was never drawn, but somehow had your key. You have climbed a dead fire tower that still remembers the taste of electricity. And you have stood inside an empty campsite, listening to a call that should have ended years ago. The thing about parks is, during the day, they are postcards. Families, trail mix, selfies at overlooks. But at night, when the last campfire dies and the radios quiet down, places like this remember everything. Every step, every missing report, every name said over an open channel. Sometimes the echoes stay where they belong. Sometimes they look for someone new to answer. That is the part they do not tell you in the Ranger Handbook. They show you how to read tracks, how to splint a broken leg, how to start a controlled burn. No one explains what to do when your own voice calls you from somewhere you have not been yet. So if you ever find yourself out there after dark and you smell wet bark on a dry night, or old smoke where no fire burns, or you hear a zipper behind you when no tent is set up, do yourself a favor. Do not follow the extra trail that is not on your map. Do not answer when the forest says your name. And if a call comes in from a place that is supposed to be empty, maybe let it go to someone else. Which of these Ranger stories stayed with you the most? Tell me in the comments, and if you want more nights like this, make sure you're subscribed, because the next shift might start with your voice on the radio.